continue the series, book club series, and we will continue the story of Never Let Me Go. Sit back, relax, enjoy the show. Tommy, who had been mocking about on the wall with Rodney, suddenly jumped down and went still. Then he said, "That's her. That's the same one." We all stopped what we were doing and watched the figure coming from the direction of the office. She was now wearing a cream colored overcoat and struggling to fasten her briefcase as she walked. The buckle was giving her trouble. So she kept slowing down and starting again. We went on watching her in a kind of trance as she went past on the other side. Then, as she turned or was turning into the high street, Ruth leaped up and said, "Let's see where she goes." We came out of our trance and were off after her. In fact, Chrissy had to remind us to slow down, or someone would think we were a gang of muggers going after the woman. We followed along the high street at a reasonable distance, giggling, dodging past people, separating and coming together again. It must have been around 2 o'clock by then, and the pavement was busy with shoppers. At times we nearly lost sight of her, but we kept up, loitering in front of window displays when she went into a shop, squeezing past push chairs and old people when she came out again. Then the woman turned off the high street into the little lanes near the seafront. Chrissy was worried she'd notice us away from the crowds, but Ruth just kept going, and we followed behind her. Eventually, we came into a narrow side street that had the occasional shop, but was mainly just ordinary houses. We had to walk again in single file, and once, when a van came the other way, we had to press ourselves into the houses to let it pass. Before long, there was only the woman and us in the entire street. And if she'd glanced back, there was no way she wouldn't have noticed us. But she just kept walking, a dozen or so steps ahead, then went in through a door into the Portway Studios. I've been back to the Portway Studios a number of times since then. It changed owners a few years ago and now sells all kinds of artsy things, pots, plates, clay animals. Back then, it was two big white rooms just with paintings, beautifully displayed with plenty of spaces between them. The wooden sign hanging over the door is still the same one, though. Anyway, we decided to go in after Rodney pointed out how suspicious we looked in that quiet little street. Inside the shop, we could at least pretend we were looking at the pictures. We came in to find the woman we'd been following talking to a much older woman with silver hair who seemed to be in charge of the place. They were sitting on either side of a small desk near the door, and apart from them, the gallery was empty. Neither woman paid much attention as we filed past, spread out, and tried to look fascinated by the pictures. Actually, preoccupied though I was with Ruth's possible, I did begin to enjoy the paintings and the sheer peacefulness of the place. It felt like we'd come 100 miles from the high street. The walls and ceilings were peppermint, and here and there you'd see a bit of fishing net or a rotted piece from a boat stuck up high near the cornicing. The paintings, too, mostly oils in deep blues and greens, had sea themes. Maybe it was the tiredness suddenly catching up with us. After all, we'd been traveling since before dawn, but I wasn't the only one who went off into a bit of a dream in there. We'd all wandered into different corners and were starting at one picture after another, only occasionally making the odd hush to remark like, "Come and look at this." All the time, we could hear Ruth's possible and the silver haired lady talking on and on. They weren't especially loud, but in that place, their voices seemed to fill the entire space. They were discussing some man they knew both, how he hadn't or how he didn't have a clue with his children. And as we kept listening to them, stealing the odd glance in their direction, bit by bit, something started to change. It did for me, and I could tell it was happening for the others. If we'd left it at seeing the woman through the glass of her office, even if we'd followed her throughout town, then lost her, we could still have gone back to the cottages excited and triumphant. But now, in that gallery, the woman was too close, much closer than we'd ever really wanted. And the more we heard her and looked at her, the less she seemed like Ruth. It was a feeling that grew among us almost tangibly, and I could tell that Ruth, absorbed in a picture on the other side of the room, was feeling it as much as anyone. That was probably why we went on shuffling around the gallery for so long. We were delaying the moment when we'd have to confer. Then suddenly the woman had left, and we all kept standing about, avoiding each other's eyes. But none of us had thought to follow the woman, and as the seconds kept ticking on, it became like we were agreeing without speaking about how we now saw the situation. Eventually, the silver haired lady came out from behind her desk and said to Tommy, who was the nearest to her, "That's a particularly lovely work. That one's a favorite of mine." Tommy turned to her and let out a laugh. Then, as I was hurrying over to help him out, the lady asked, "Are you art students?" "Not exactly," I said before Tommy could respond. "We're just, well, keen." The silver haired lady beamed, then started to tell us how the artist whose work we were looking at was related to her, and all about the artist's career thus far. This had the effect, at least, of breaking the trance like state we'd been in, and we gathered around her to listen, the way we might have done at Hailsham when a guardian started to speak. This really got the silver haired lady going, and we kept nodding and exclaiming while she talked about where the paintings had been done, the times of day the artist liked to work, how some had been done without sketches. Then there came a kind of a natural end to her lecture, and we all gave a sigh, thanked her, and went out. The street outside being so narrow, we couldn't talk properly for a while longer, and I think we were all grateful for that. As we walked away from the gallery in a single file, I could see Rodney up at the front, theatrically stretching out his arms like he was exhilarated the way he'd been when we'd first arrived in the town. But it wasn't convincing, and once we came out onto a wider street, we all shuffled to a halt. We were once again near a cliff edge, and like before, if you peered over the rail, you could see the paths zigzagging down to the seafront, except this time you could see